Hello there, coming to you live from the bunker. This is episode 45 of JW Watch, the show that keeps a close eye on all things JW, offering Jehovah's Witnesses a more objective viewpoint on current developments that the governing body almost certainly doesn't want them to hear. Today, a criminal court in Belgium found Jehovah's Witnesses guilty of discrimination through their practice of shunning and treatment of former members, imposing a fine of €12,000. The group claims the ruling is a violation of the human rights of members and also says that this is the first time since the 16th century that a public authority in Western Europe has officially made it a criminal offence to read and follow the Bible. Joining me to discuss this remarkable development is my trusty sidekick and fellow JW Watch co-host, Mark O'Donnell. We also have joining us Kim Silvio from Australia and man of the hour, Patrick Haeck, who was instrumental in all of this happening. Welcome, panel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd. Hey, Kim and Patrick. Lovely to have you here.
Morning, Mark.
Good evening to everybody.
Well, it's a very good evening for you, Patrick, because you've been working on this now since 2015. Over 5 years, is it even 6 years? I can't remember. It seems so long ago since I was in the lawyer's office with you that time, and we were talking about all this. So much water under the bridge since then, and finally we have a verdict. Presumably this is what you wanted.
Correct. We worked a lot of, we did a lot of investigation, we did a lot of work just to get where we got to now. And we didn't do this alone. There was lots of help of other ex-GWs who were willing to tell their story and share the story with the judge and with all persons involved. So together, this is not only my job, this is a job we did together.
Indeed, there were. I don't know how many there were listed on the lawsuit, but I'm guessing about a dozen or so.
More. There were over 35 stories of people telling their history, how they got out of Jehovah's Witnesses, what they experienced as a result of the shunning. But not all were able to go as civil party because of the fear of money. They were wondering how much will this cost if the court case is going wrong and Jehovah's Witnesses are right in shunning us. So to be afraid of paying huge amounts of money withdrew a lot of people who told their story, and others were still in contact, still in touch, small connections with the parents or family members who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and were afraid if their names were made public that all connections would be destroyed. So we never obliged people to do anything that would harm the person in question. So it was very important for me that nobody was hurting himself above, on top of what the Jehovah's Witnesses already did.
How long were the proceedings today? Because obviously you had the hearing last month in February.
Yeah.
Usually when you have a case like this, you expect it to go on a bit longer, but it feels as though you just had the one hearing last month and now the verdict today. How long were you in the courtroom for?
Today we were about half an hour in the courtroom, just to hear the reading of the verdict. That was it.
That was it? Just half an hour?
Yeah, half an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, forgive me for mentioning the elephant in the room, but I've already seen a few people talking about this. €12,000 isn't a small amount of money. It's about what Mark O'Donnell spends on cat food on a yearly basis. But it's still quite a small sum. Why that figure exactly? What was the logic behind that?
Well, Belgium is not the United States, but it's good to know that the 12,000 euros will be multiplied by 8. So the state is correcting that amount of money with a factor 8. So in total, if Jehovah's Witnesses do not appeal, they have to pay 96,000 euros, which is still a small amount of money seen from the point of view that what whiskey costs, if you ask Tony Morris.
Indeed. But again, we're still talking, is this kind of more a case of sending a message,
Correct.
We're giving you a fine, rather than it being this, outrageous number going into the millions that could easily be construed as some kind of persecution?
Well, the most important thing is that finally the shunning is condemned as a criminal fact, as a criminal act. You can compare it to murdering someone because he is a homosexual. You can say, okay, this is a biblical rule. We have to stone to death all homosexuals. But in fact, if you translate such an act in juridic language, then you say this is murder. So murder is a crime. And now what the judge told us is that shunning is a crime. It's a hate crime. It's a discrimination crime. So this is a very, very important thing, because every following excommunication, every following disfellowshipping connected to shunning can result immediately in a court case, because it is recognized as it's recognized as a crime.
Yeah, that was really my question, Patrick, was, in the United States, when we have certain court cases that are filed here, some of those cases are regarded as precedents, meaning that other cases that follow will follow the ruling in your case or in that particular case. So is that going to be drawn up in writing so that it's very clear? And I assume this just applies in Belgian courtrooms at this point, or does it affect other European countries?
It will affect other European countries, because they will make a reference to what the Belgian court has decided. So in Finland, we already have contact in Finland with people who are starting the same kind of court case. And they already received some information about what happened in Belgium. So they already took it to the prosecutor.
Does this mean then that any European Union or EU country then has to follow suit with whatever passes in any one of its member countries?
No. We hope that the Jehovah's Witnesses will appeal to the verdict, so that we can go to a higher court. And if we reach the top of what's possible in Belgium, then we can go further and go to Strasbourg, to the European Court. And what the European Court is deciding is valuable for any court and any courtroom in Europe. And if the European Court decides that shunning is a crime, then you can expect that other continents will follow. The United States will follow, Australia will follow, Japan will follow. So you can easily see that what happens now is a precedent that is not only valuable for Jehovah's Witnesses. We have also contact here in Belgium with the people who are helping ex-members of the Orthodox Jewish community, and also from the Muslim community. Extremist Muslim communities do sometimes worse things than what happens in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Very remarkable this morning was how the judge accentuated the sentence, or the phrase, religion is not standing above the law. And that was very clear.
Wow. Kim, obviously, we haven't really had a chance to go over the paperwork. I do have some paperwork that we're going to show although, full disclosure, my Flemish is a bit rusty. But we're nevertheless going to at least show some of these documents. And there's, very interestingly, a press release from the Belgian equivalent of CCJW, I guess. Are you expecting Jehovah's Witnesses to appeal, or do you think they're going to sit on this?
I think they'll appeal. I hope they appeal for the same reasons that Patrick outlined. I think they will appeal on the basis that that it is their opinion that they're being impinged upon their their religious doctrine, and that they have freedom of religion. I think that will be their argument. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at the verdict, shall we? I'm going to try and do this as seamlessly as possible, as always. Now, again, my Flemish is not brilliant. Should I look at Vonnisdeel 1 or Vonnisdeel 2, Patrick?
I don't know. I have heard the verdict, but I was not able to read the verdict yet.
Okay, well, let's look at Vonnisdeel 1. And as I was saying off air, usually the interesting stuff. Can we see that, by the way? I'll just quickly check. Yeah, that's on there. Usually the interesting stuff on these documents is towards the end. So when you have a verdict, that is. So interestingly, I think I was browsing this just a moment ago because it's literally just come into my inbox. I think it was Vonnisdeel 2 that I need, because Vonnisdeel, the one I was looking at, actually had your name on it towards the end.
Yeah.
And there was a thing that I wanted to ask you about. So let me just close that down.
Yeah, it looks like it has a list of those who maybe testified. I saw Matthias' name on that as well.
So let me open up instead Vonnisdeel 2.
But I can shortly tell you the content of the document.
Yeah, there we are. So your names appear. So there you are, Patrick Haeck, and there you have your family there. What's the bit about €1?
We could ask money for damage that we suffered, but we were not interested in money. We just wanted to hear the judgment of the court concerning the shunning. We wanted to hear the judge say this is a crime, and that is where we are. So we never wanted to give Jehovah's Witnesses any opportunity to say, oh, they are just looking after the money. They are asking for, let's say, €100,000. So we, it was not.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. So that's a really clever strategy, because obviously any Jehovah's Witnesses looking in on this will be thinking, yes, these are apostates. They're going to have selfish aims. They're going to be wanting money. And what you're telling me is that you just put in €1 just as like a token amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
interesting. And even the €1 was not something that we asked. It was something that was granted by the judge.
Okay. So
it's a symbolic euro.
Yeah, it would have been considered a requirement.
Maybe 66 cents or €6.66. Just a suggestion, always nice to mess with them a little bit. Anyway. So if we just go down to, there's a bit that looks like it might be overige burgerlijke belangen. Looks rather menacing. Yeah. Is it menacing?
This is the civil well-being, civil importance.
Right.
You have to know that there is in Belgium, under the federal government of justice, there is an organization that is defending freedom, and they are fighting any kind of hate speech and hate acts and discrimination. And the organization is called UNIA. And the Jehovah's Witnesses said that the UNIA was not objective, but was very, very focused on attacking Jehovah's Witnesses. So they were prejudiced, they said, and the judge ruled that UNIA did his job, and that it was Jehovah's Witnesses who were not willing to cooperate with the federal police. You know, all people who were telling their story on paper were invited by the investigating judicial police, and even Jehovah's Witnesses were invited, and they refused to come. So the people of Battle decided to write a letter that the state has nothing to see what happens in the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, very rude, and they say we are not willing to come, and we decide to make our point, our statement on paper, and you will have to do it with that. So the judge was not pleased with that point of view of Jehovah's Witnesses. So what I can see is that they seem to be so naive in so many aspects of the court case. It seems like they think that Jehovah is protecting them, and that they are the ruler, and they are going through all kinds of decisions of the judge, and they are standing above it. So they have a very they are very high thinking of themselves.
We see that all over the world, don't we, in terms of their legal strategy. It's almost like, on the one hand, they say, well, we'll leave matters in Jehovah's hands. And on the other hand, they seem to take this view of, let's give Jehovah something to bless, you know? So, yeah, that's fascinating. So there was basically an independent kind of arbiter involved, and Jehovah's Witnesses tried to claim that they were biased when they weren't. So, okay.
In fact, Lloyd, this is a second victory, because in the history of going to court, it is very important to know that when the claim was made in 2015, and after the investigation was finished, it was the public prosecutor who summoned the Jehovah's Witnesses before court. So it was not me who had to summon them before court. The court case was started by the public prosecutor. So this means that there was already a kind of evaluation of the hate crime inside the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. So there was already a validation of the subject, and it seems not to be so easy to stimulate the public prosecutor to go and act concerning the claims of someone who is making a complaint.
Wow. So it's looking like, I take that on board. And again, you know, you're to be commended, because you have been working on this for years, I know. And at one point, I think I'm right in saying that you were looking at kind of pursuing this personally with your own finances. And then it reached the point where the public prosecutor was so won over by the case that they were like, no, actually, we'll take it on board. This is our case now. And you were basically lifted from having to shoulder the burden, which is fantastic. But, you know, when the laws are there about discrimination, it's right that they should be enforced, you know, and like the judge said, you don't get to, you know, sidestep them just because you're calling yourself a religion. So that's a really positive verdict. And we have the statement that's been released by Jehovah's Witnesses.
I was just looking at that, Lloyd, and I was looking at a rough translation of that. I found some very interesting comments there. Did you want me to?
Yeah, by all means, tell me what you want. What do you want me to show you?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is, as you're pulling up that document, I have a rough translation I can read here.
What's the most interesting paragraph for us to look at, do you think?
Wow. Okay. So let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. So one of those that really stood out to me was the fact that the CCJW And again, this is, let me just, Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm looking at the address. It's the Association Rue d'Argile. Is this, this is the, not the, is it the Dutch branch or no,
Yeah, that's the Belgian branch.
Belgian branch. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a press release dated March 16th, 2021. The paragraph that stood out to me was the one that is, I guess, second from the end. It says, referring to these legally sound principles, Professor Holly Folk, a professor at Western Washington University, said, it is not for the government to interfere with decisions made by well-informed adults. Indeed, reality shows many established religions apply the rule of no longer maintaining close ties with those who have renounced their faith. I just, we could spend all day on this one paragraph here because, first of all, so that everyone knows, Holly Folk is an individual who is in a close association and works with Massimo Introvigne, which is part of this organization that has defended Jehovah's Witnesses, but they've also defended some very, very corrupt and dangerous cults, such as the Shinriko cult that released the sarin gas in Japan. So they are claiming that they are, and based on religious freedoms and principles, they're defending Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, Holly Folk has done an entire video on the Atlantic article about child abuse, defending Jehovah's Witnesses in their position. So
it doesn't get much lower than that, does it? Defending the facilitating of child abuse and the keeping of a secret database. You have to sink pretty low, don't you, as a quote-unquote intellectual. This, for me, seems like cult apologists for hire, to be honest, when we're looking at individuals like Holly Folk and Massimo Introvigne.
Well, when you look at what she says there, there's some statement. Some of this just really stands out as egregious comments here. First of all, it says it's not for the government to interfere with decisions made by well-informed adults. So let me address that first of all. The majority of Jehovah's Witnesses today made the decision to get baptized and become Jehovah's Witnesses when they were not well-informed adults. Over years of indoctrination from childhood onward, most of us were baptized at 12, 13, 15, 16 years of age. That is a decision that cannot be reversed. You cannot unbaptize yourself. Jehovah's Witnesses won't allow that. You can't annul your baptism. So she's making a absolutely false statement that these are decisions by well-informed adults. Absolutely not. Then she goes on to say, reality shows many established religions apply the rule of no longer maintaining close ties with those who have renounced their faith. So she's basically trying to, conflate what Jehovah's Witnesses do with other religious groups. But the truth is that no one shuns people except maybe Scientology, you could argue, has just a very powerful shunning disconnection policy. But certainly Jehovah's Witnesses are the largest religious organization that disrupts families, destroys the relationship with their mother, father, sisters, brothers, friends, more so than any other organization. So she's trying to claim that other religions do this, and she's trying to call these legally sound principles. I just, these statements are just absurd. But, I don't know, Patrick, maybe you have some comments. I don't know if Holly Folk was in attendance or any of her group are in attendance at this court hearing or case. I know they've submitted documents.
Yeah. The only thing they did was in the running to the court, in the conclusions that were made, go and back. Jehovah's Witnesses used some expressions of Professor Massimo Introvigne, and he was immediately shut down by all investigations on the internet as someone who has his own reasons to defend Jehovah's Witnesses. So this was easily done, and now they are not referring to Professor Massimo, but to Professor Holly Folk, who looks to me, when I hear her on the internet, some weird person.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to be seriously, without morals, wouldn't you? To think this is how I'm going to earn my living. I'm going to stand up for and defend abusive cults. Wow.
Yeah. What is remarkable in this paper as well? Jehovah's Witnesses were interviewed by the press in Belgium, and they again and again try to make it believed that there is a synonym between being excommunicated, being disfellowshipped, and the shunning. For Jehovah's Witnesses, this is all the same. Being disfellowshipped is being shunned. And what we did here in Belgium was splitting the two out. We said disfellowshipping is an organizational right. Any organization has the right to summon up rules, to create rules, and on the basis of that rule decide to accept someone into the organization, to refuse someone in the organization, or to disfellowship someone in the organization. And we say there is nothing wrong about excommunication, about disfellowshipping someone. What's more, we don't want to be Jehovah's Witnesses again. We are not fighting that excommunication. What we are fighting is what the Jehovah's Witnesses encourage to do with those who are disassociated or who are disfellowshipped. This is not done. This is this is a violation of the human rights, and the court followed us immediately. So if someone is thinking about copying this court case in any other country, make sure that you make the split out and do not be disguised by Jehovah's Witnesses who repeat again and again and again, we have the right to disfellowship people. Of course you have the right. We are not talking about what the disfellowshipping is doing. We are talking about what the shunning is doing to the victims of shunning.
And presumably you'd extend cooperation to anyone in other countries who are considering pursuing similar action based on their discrimination laws.
Yeah.
Excellent.
If I may, another thing that really stood out, in fact, Lloyd, you asked this question about what stood out from the press release from Watchtower or CCJW. The very first paragraph, if you want to, you have that up on screen there. The very first paragraph actually was so egregious that it made some of the press articles that came out. So this is the rough translation of that. It says on March 16th, the Gent Magistrates Court ruled against the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses of Belgium on the application of the biblical standard or cease or limit contact with a person excommunicated or disfellowshipped or who had made the decision to voluntarily withdraw from the assembly. Now here's the fun part. This is what the press quoted. For the first time since the 16th century, a public institution in Western Europe makes it punishable by law to read and follow what the Bible teaches. In the broadest sense, this decision violates the fundamental right of an individual or organization to decide who she or he wants to attend. Now, that's a rough translation. It's not exact. But the statement that was quoted in the press says, I mean, it's just outrageous that.
Well, we have our friend Jan following
there
along.
We go.
Watchtower is so pathetic. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that is outlawed today.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the society forbids people to read and study the Bible, as they claim. Now, Leviticus 20:13 says that you should kill gay people. So, you know, would a court be wrong in telling an organization that they can't arrange for that sort of thing to happen? Obviously, there have to be reasonable limits on how people interpret. And it is all just about interpretation, isn't it?
Read and follow what the Bible teaches. Anyone can read and follow the Bible and interpret it 100 different ways. And that's why our civil authorities ultimately have to be the highest authority. Otherwise, we have anarchy and people, sacrificing goats in the street because they believe in the Old Testament, or stoning persons because they're gay or because they had an adulterous relationship. I mean, it goes on and on and on. As you said, Lloyd, it's, we certainly cannot have this kind of an interpretation, but Watchtower is saying here, the Jehovah's Witnesses are saying, oh, you're violating our right to practice Bible teachings. as they interpret
and
them.
if they really do feel that this is a human rights issue, because glancing through, they do seem to be talking about what's happening in Russia as well. Bring it on. Let's. Why don't you appeal it, and then Patrick can have his way, and the case can kind of drift up, so that the magnitude of this gets felt in more than one country. So yeah, bring it on.
Just to draw a comparison, like what Jan said is 100% correct. It absolutely gets on my goat, as it does everybody. There's not really any difference between what they're saying in this particular case and the two-witness rule. They when it suits them, they'll apply the principle, and they will rely on religious doctrine and therefore then religious persecution. But the reality is, the point that the judge made, that Patrick brought out earlier, was that no religion has the right to determine the law, and that is the key issue. They cannot, because anyone can. Then what, are you going to make it legal to kill people and stone people to death? And you can't have your cake and eat it too. You cannot be selective. The court has to ensure, the law has to ensure that people are protected, and that that society is looked after. And I think that Mark will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but the Montana case was I think was a classic example of that, where they are applying and they're telling the government what the law is, what the law should be, or what is the law is going to be, in terms of the clergy penitent, their definition of the clergy penitent privilege. Penitent.
Easy for you to
penitent. Say. I can't say it. I can't make it up. Thank you, Lloyd. But that is. This really is an overarching example of many times where the organisation has done that. They're going to dictate to the government what the law is going to be, how it's going to be applied, and when it's going to be applied. And that's obviously in a situation that would suit them.
Yeah, I think in those cases, it goes back to when the laws were originally written. Like in the Montana case, back in 1991, the law was made that added clergy to the list of mandatory reporters. So that was great. That meant that all clergymen are mandatory reporters. But several religious groups, including some Catholic groups, got very upset and said, well, we need to insert some language because you're discriminating against our religious right to have clergy confession and to have that kept private. So what they did was in 1991 in Montana, they wrote some lines of code, and that one little line of code in there stated that if a religious organization treats the confessional arrangement, how can I say it? If, their interpretation of the confessional arrangement is their interpretation for their religious group, whereas the Catholic model is different. So therefore, you can't hold the Jehovah's Witnesses to the Catholic model. The Catholic model says you have a priest and a penitent person. A penitent goes to the priest, confesses his crime. That's to be kept quiet. But what the Jehovah's Witnesses have done is they've taken this little line of code and they say, hey, the way we interpret that is that all of the congregation elders and other congregations and New York Service Department, all of that falls under confidentiality within our church rules and the Supreme Court. So their hands were tied by legislation that was enacted way back in 1991.
And I understand that point, and I take it very clearly. But as is the case in this particular, the case in Belgium, but also with Montana, I don't think that it's right. And I hope that this process, if it does go to the Human Rights Commission, which I hope it really, really does, that they will start to realise that just like Jehovah's Witnesses say, well, that in Montana, that particular piece of legislation we determined to be X, Y, and Z. What if it extended to, we believe that the clergy penitent privilege goes so far as to include parents? Really, like if you're not going to, if the government's not going to define it, Watchtower can make it whatever they want and to suit their own situations. So I think that the point that the judge made in this particular case is extremely relevant, that no religion has the right to determine the law. I think it's relevant, and I think it's extremely relevant across the world, everywhere.
What we're going to do shortly is Mark is going to take us through a few news headlines. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity to go around the panel and summarize our thoughts. I do just have one question for Patrick before we do that. Patrick, obviously, you'll be aware that I was involved in ICSA, in the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, as a core participant, and the hearings actually got postponed due to COVID. I was due to fly to the UK and take part in those hearings, but then they got cancelled, and it all ended up happening virtually. And I was distraught because I was looking forward to having my day in court. I was really looking forward to being in, I know it's not a court, it's an inquiry, but I was looking forward to being in a hearing room and staring down Watchtower representatives and, seeing them squirm under scrutiny. After so many years of planning, and we all know how stressful litigating is, what was it like for you to finally have your day in court?
Well, it started with the victory because the first line was already very positive. The judge was reading the verdict line by line, and every line, the smile on our face, and I say our because Belinda was with me, my wife Belinda was with me, and we looked at each other and we said, wow. And we could hear that the judge was following us for the full 100%. And there was one Watchtower representative, David was there. And David was also at the courts, at when the court was pleaded. The case was pleaded on the 16th of February. And then he was very arrogant. He stood straight and was taking pictures of each and every XGW, almost saying...
Did you just say that they were taking pictures of the XJW?
Yeah, he was very, very arrogant. And today...
Can you tell us who he is, Patrick?
David van den Driessen.
What is his position?
He is the district overseer in Belgium.
Did you say that was in the courtroom?
In the courtroom, yeah.
I don't think they have district overseers anymore, Patrick. Was it maybe a branch committee member? Maybe a branch committee.
He will certainly be he's living on the branch address.
Okay, he's maybe a branch committee member. Okay, but he was taking your picture in the courtroom.
Yeah, he was ostensibly taking pictures, and everybody said, "What an arrogant asshole." But today it was completely different. It was knock, knock, knock. Every sentence of the judge, you saw him like this, and his arrogancy was completely gone.
Was the judge aware that he was taking photos?
Sorry?
Was the judge aware?
Did the judge notice that he was doing that and taking photographs?
The judge didn't enter the room yet.
So it's before the judge had entered the room. Wow.
Yeah.
You should definitely lodge a complaint to the court for that, because they will have it on
intimidating
CCTV.
behaviour, isn't it?
It's absolutely not acceptable. I'm more than happy to follow up with you after the show about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules are in Belgian courtrooms, but certainly
there's no way.
I couldn't stand up and just start snapping photos in any of the cases I've been. You'd have to get permission from the judge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like
Incredible.
a media permissions.
You need to be a journalist, and it has to be approved.
But so this was at the hearing in February, and at the verdict, which you say happened in like half an hour. You could see in his body language, could you, that he was taking a beating?
Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, couldn't have happened to a nicer chap. Let's go, shall we, to our news roundup. I'm sorry, Mark. I still haven't had a chance to fix that yet.
Maybe we could do.
I'll get Tibor on that.
I'll get Tibor on that. Photo than that one too.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Okay.
I feel so underdressed. You show this man in the the nice tie and suit and patent leather shoes, and here I am. So we've got just a couple of news items that I want to bring to everybody's attention. So this one's kind of important. So in London, in an appeal court in the Royal Courts of Justice in London, there was a ruling against the Jehovah's Witnesses in a civil case that was heard over 2 years ago. So a woman referred to as BXB sued the Jehovah's Witnesses following the revelation that the Bury congregation, which is in Wales in the UK, had covered up the rape of BXB, and that took place when she was 29 years of age. So the reason this is particularly groundbreaking is because it's the first case of vicarious liability brought by an adult, not a child, against the Watchtower organization over in the UK. So what happened there was 2 years ago, and just to be clear, there were at least 3 victims we know of this man who was sent to prison. In fact, we have an article in the paper here in, I think, is it the London Times, written by David Brown. It's whatever paper he works for, that discusses Mark Sewell. I
think it was the Times, actually.
The Times.
The Times newspaper, yeah.
Right, written by David Brown. So, it's online behind a paywall, but it's also, there's a print copy that's been circulating. So, as we've discussed before on the show, there's a man by the name of Mark Sewell who sexually abused multiple young women in connection with their Jehovah's Witness congregation in Wales, the Bury congregation. So again, several of them were minors, and there were several lawsuits filed, but this particular case is the one of a woman who was 29 years of age when she was raped by Mark Sewell, and she brought this to the courts 2 years ago and won. Then Watchtower appealed it, of course. So the big news that just happened yesterday is that Watchtower lost the appeal. And so not only are they liable for a sizable amount of money that was originally, judged in her favor 2 years ago, but they also have to pay all of the interest that comes along with the delay, the 2-year delay. And that could be a very significant amount of money as well. So again, this
weren't the governing body named as vicariously liable in this lawsuit?
I don't have the court documents in front of me. I think they may have been named, but
I think it might be in the article.
Okay, I'm looking at the article right now. Let's see. It mentions the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. It says the governing body and trustees of the Bury congregation were found vicariously liable for the rape at the civil hearing. You're correct.
That's the faithful slave, folks, named as vicariously liable in a child sex abuse lawsuit.
Mark, sorry, could you just read that again? What was the governing body and what?
So here's the statement. This is paragraph, looks like 5. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, the governing body, and the trustees of the Bury congregation in Wales were found vicariously liable for the rape at a civil hearing. Mm. So, there's a whole lot more to this case. And I think we're going to be seeing and talking about this quite a bit more. I've had a conversation with John Viney today, and he gave me permission to use his name and to talk about this. He is reaching out to the press. He's been working on this for quite some time because and I'm allowed to say that he did testify in the original trial because he was one of the elders involved in the original congregation charges that were brought against Mark Sewell. In addition to that, someone very closely related to him was also a victim. So I won't say any more than that and I think John is watching and he will be commenting on, I'm not looking at the comments right now, but he will be commenting on this. So I wanted to thank John for all of the incredible work that he's done, because it's very tough, because it involves family members. It involves a congregation that he was very close to for a very long time. He's a very genuine individual, but he had to do the right thing and testify. And this is, again, this is another victory for a victim. And what is significant, what John pointed out today, was the fact that you have someone who was not a minor at the time of this sexual assault or this rape. This does set a precedent for adult victims of sexual abuse to seek justice against the organization that either permitted it, covered it up, whatever the case. It's what the court calls vicarious liability. And because of this, the actions of Mark Sewell and what the congregation knew about him, they ultimately are bearing responsibility, as the court has ruled, for the rape of this 29-year-old woman. So, look, this is a significant case. It's something that I don't think I expected to see quite this early on, where they're held liable for an adult rape or sexual assault. So it's got some really powerful there's some really powerful implications of what has happened here over in the United Kingdom. So again, I want to thank John for helping us out with information on that and for doing the work that he's done. So any questions, shoot them over to us in the comments. If we have time, we'll get to those. But that's what's going on in London. So there's another case that's just been reported on in Argentina. So this coming Friday, in 3 days, on March 19th, a decision is going to be handed down in an Argentinian court following the criminal prosecution of two Jehovah's Witnesses named Matias Vargas and Luciano Vito. These two individuals have been charged in connection with criminal sexual assaults of two Jehovah's Witness women. And the articles actually name their names, but you can find that if you Google the article. So the lawyers for the women are actually seeking between 16 and 20 years as prison sentences for both of the alleged perpetrators. So that's what we know right now. That article was just released today, naming that the decision is going to be handed down this Friday. I don't think there's any question that these two are going to be found guilty. The question is really what the penalties will be. And of course, there's also the possibility of civil action. I have no information about that in the future. This is a criminal case, but just like in the United States and other countries, civil action can follow if it's determined that the Jehovah's Witness elders or the congregation or the Watchtower organization failed to report sexual assault or sexual abuse of minors or anyone. And
it's probably worth saying that
potentially liable.
If anyone is watching this show in Argentina and knows about the case and is in a position to help the team here at JW Watch to understand more about what's happening, please do reach out to us. Go to jwwatch.org and you'll find our contact details on the contact page. Yeah,
thank you for saying that, Lloyd. And finally, I just want to give everyone an update on what's going on in Chicago, just to recap the news there. There was a court case back in 2019. It was a criminal trial of a man by the name of Arturo Hernandez Pedraza. And he was found guilty of sexually assaulting a very, very close relative for between 12 and 13 years that we know of, possibly more. And what happened was back in 2006, this 7-year-old child told her mother what had happened. She told the elders. The elders then contacted Watchtower's legal department in New York. New York told those elders not to report the abuse to the authorities, and they did not report it. And as a result, this child went on to be very savagely abused for another 13 years until finally she was able, as she was approaching adulthood, to speak to someone in the police. And look, for anyone that, has ever been a victim of assault, especially as a child, they know how difficult it is not only to just talk about it, but to speak to an authority in law enforcement about it. It's extremely difficult, particularly if that person's a close relative that might be your provider of housing. It's an extraordinary conflict of interest when you have a child that's been abused by a close relative. So that's the underlying case. So this man was found guilty, sentenced to 50 years in prison. However, as a result of the state of Illinois finding out that the elders knew about this is all the way back to 2006, they spent a year investigating this or more and decided to press charges against 2 elders. One of them is Michael Penkava, and the other is Colin Scott. Now, both of these men are in their 70s and 80s. I believe Colin Scott is approaching 89, if he's not already 89 years of age. But they have filed Class A misdemeanor charges against both elders. And so they were not taken to jail. The charges were filed in such a way that they have to appear for their court hearings, but they've not been imprisoned yet. So therefore, they're not out of, they're technically out on their own recognizance. I just want to make that clear. I saw some reports where someone said they thought they were in jail. They're not. However, the crimes for which they committed are Class A misdemeanor crimes. And those crimes, if found guilty, are punishable by up to 1 year in prison and up to $2,500 fine in the state of Illinois. So the upshot is that the trial was actually scheduled for tomorrow. But because of some events that did not involve the case itself, the trial has been postponed. There's going to be a hearing on March 26th. At that point, there's going to be an announcement by the court or a decision by the court as to what the trial date will be. So you can be sure that I'll be there for that once we find out.
Can I reveal what our plan is for that?
Sure, by all means.
We're going to have our first ever live report, JW Watch live report. We're going to try and live stream from outside the courthouse. A JW Watch first. So look out for that next week.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll all work out. Yeah, well, not next week. So the 26th of March is the 26th. Date when so that's the date actually they're going to announce the trial.
Right.
And at that so it could be another 2 or 3 weeks after that. We just don't know. It could be 6 months. I don't think it's going to be that long, but there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes with that, and investigation continues. There are documents that are publicly available that reveal some very, very interesting things. One of those is the fact that these elders, and I can say this as publicly available documents, but those elders are actually throwing it back on Watchtower as part of their defense. So that they've both got attorneys in Illinois that are, far as we know, non-Jehovah's Witness attorneys. We don't know officially if they're getting advised by Watchtower lawyers in New York. We don't think they are. We don't have proof of that. But what we do know is that part of their defense is that they are asking for Watchtower's legal department representative that advised them to testify in this case. And that's quite interesting because the state of Illinois didn't object to that. Normally they would. But they're trying to get to the truth of the matter. They're trying to find out who is responsible for this 13-year lapse of reporting to Illinois authority, because this is a law. And by the way, there are some clergy penitent exceptions in there, but according to the state of Illinois, they don't apply. So they're digging further into this, trying to find out who in the world is this Watchtower attorney that advised these men. According to the public documents, they state that Penkava and Scott both would like to be vindicated by having the Watchtower lawyer testify. But here's what we know about Watchtower lawyers. When an elder calls Watchtower's legal department to report alleged child abuse, which is what they're instructed to do, they are not given the name of the elder or the lawyer they're talking to. And there's a number of reasons for that. And it's my belief that among those reasons are the fact that these people, these elders who work for the legal department, are not necessarily lawyers. They receive so many phone calls. We know there's only a handful of lawyers that work for, compared to the rest of the Bethel, the thousands that work at Bethel complexes. There's only a handful, and some of those have been lawyers like Philip Brumley and others like what's his name in Australia that were sent to law school. Vincent Toole, right, Kim? That were sent to law school by Watchtower.
Shane Brady.
Shane Brady is another. So Here you've got a situation where they're kind of running out of attorneys. And so they work under these anonymous 3-digit codes where if they communicate with Watchtower, they're using these 3-digit codes. So it really puts the local elders in a terrible position because they don't know if they're actually talking to a lawyer. They just know that they're talking to the legal department of Watchtower. Whether there's implications of that, I don't know. But I do know this, that when I read the code for mandatory reporting for clergy, something very interesting is written in that code. And that is that if someone obstructs justice or prevents a mandatory reporter from reporting, that may be punishable as a felony. I'm not going to say anything more. You could read into that whatever you want, but it's there in the code. I'm certainly happy to provide that Illinois code to anyone that asks. But among other things, it could be a felony, or it is a felony, to obstruct the mandatory reporter. So the question is whether or not Watchtower's legal department committed a felony in ill-advising or obstructing justice by telling those elders that in 2006 that they should not report. These are very serious issues. I believe this is a groundbreaking case. We've never had criminal prosecution of 2 elders. We had the state of Delaware civilly prosecute 2 elders, and Watchtower had to pay $10,000 per elder to settle that case. But we've never seen this criminal prosecution before. This is absolutely groundbreaking, which is why we need to be there on the ground with this case. And I'll keep everybody posted, but the short story there is it's been postponed, and we'll find out on the 26th when the bench trial will happen.
Well, speaking of groundbreaking cases, we've had one, or we've had a verdict today in Belgium, which is cause for celebration, quite frankly, for thousands of you who may watch this in the days and weeks to come, who suffer due to the organisation's shunning policy. You'll be heartened to know that finally the organisation is being held to account, albeit in a small way, but hopefully there's room for this to become a big thing in the future. And what we're going to do now is just go around the panel. Probably, Kim, if your connection will allow it, can you give us your thoughts? I mean, obviously you haven't been through all the paperwork, I realise that, but based on what you've seen in the media and that kind of thing, what are your thoughts?
Firstly, I just want to congratulate all of the people that are involved with Belgium. It would have taken a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of tears, a lot of heartache, a lot of fear to do what you've done. So I say good on you. I really, particularly in respect of this individual case, what I really particularly appreciate is the fact that your case is about your human rights, your rights as a human being to be treated like every other member of society, not just simply because you walked away, therefore you're entitled to be treated less than like every other human in society. So going, standing up for those human rights, not trying to ban the organization or to intervene in the religious practices of the organization. I think that really is the key, in that you just want to be treated like everybody else who's not a Jehovah's Witness. And I think that's fair. I think it's right. And I'm really pleased that the court can see that, because I don't agree with Watchtower having based on some vague scripture that they pick out of the Bible, saying that they've got the right to tell the governments of any country that they have that they're doing it on a religious basis. If it actually goes against the fundamental rights of a human being, it should not be permitted. So I'm very, very happy for all of the Belgian people. I would really be interested in following up that camera situation in the court. And I did also just want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to all of people who celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
Yes,
and the reason
named
why
after Patrick.
There we are. See, it happened St. Patrick's Day in Australia. This was meant to be, Patrick.
Indeed.
The reason I remember that it was St. Patrick's Day is because it is the 17th of March, which anybody in Australia and probably the rest of the world would know, is that if Watchtower have not put in their paperwork by today, then the game is on, and the charitable status could well be removed. So I would encourage...
Right, okay.
Yes,
Okay. Well,
it's
you can't just
exciting.
drop that on us. Now we need to talk about
That's
that,
a news
don't we?
item.
So
No, well,
are
it's not.
you
I'm not
saying
entitled to news items because I don't have a fancy.
Now Kim Silvio reads the news. Let's take
have you
it
I will
just
to Kim.
told
pivot
us?
back to
Have you just told us that they could lose their charitable status
Yeah.
after all? Okay.
Well, I did say that in the live stream, the
you
last
did.
Watchtower in Focus, that this is what they're saying, which is great. But if they don't carry through with it, the government are still. It's just because you say you're going to do something. If you don't do it, the government, nothing changes. The
You
government
need
will
to make a
implement.
phone call. You can't just issue a press release. Yeah.
No, that's right. And you have to actually, because it's quite a lengthy onboarding process. It's not just a matter of, yeah, how you going? Yeah, just write our name down. Like, it doesn't work like that. There's paperwork. They've got, financial things they need to demonstrate. There's a whole gamut of stuff. It literally takes months. So I would think that if they have not, if all they've done is just issued their statement, and that's the only evidence I have to this minute, that's the information I have, is that's all they've done. If that's not good enough, the government are not going to make the effort they've made and just go, oh, okay, we'll just wait for another year until they pull their
Well,
out.
hopefully things have been happening behind the scenes, but certainly if it is as you've suggested, we will be jumping on this all over again, and there will be fodder for another episode.
Yeah. But the final point that I do want to make is, and this is to everybody, what Patrick and the people associated with Patrick has done, what's going on in other countries with court cases, with governments, with politicians. This is where change happens. So it is scary. I'm sure Patrick could sit for 3 days and say how scary it is. But it's worth it. And if we all do this and stand up and say, I know I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway, then that's when change can happen. So I just can only thank you, Patrick, so much, and all of your colleagues and friends in Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to ask for your thoughts now, Patrick. But before I do that, I do need to quickly acknowledge some super chats that have been coming through. I'm not going to be monetizing this show. I'm just not even going to try. So these really do help support the channel. Rachel Estelle, happy birthday. Good luck with your boyfriend, and thank you for the super chat. Thanks also to Sassy D, to Catalin, mutual friend of myself and Patrick, Jeremiah H, the Aussie Outdoor Blokes, and Sean Miller. Thank you so much for your super chats, which do help the show. Patrick, Kim has just said that you were scared going into this case.
Scared, yes and no. The scare was especially financial. How much will it cost? Will we gain something back? We had a terrible business year, so then the financial pressure is increasing, and that causes some scary moments. But after all, we survived the whole thing, and I believe that Jehovah's Witnesses would say, yes, the devil is blessing you, but anyhow, we are happy that we are still here and we reached our goal.
You did. But your ultimate goal, it seems, is to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. So we might need to drag you back onto the show for a future episode. Yeah.
The scary moments I saw were especially with the XGWs, even those who were out for decades, and they were still thinking that this is Jehovah's organization, and if you bring Jehovah's organization before court, then you're fighting Jehovah himself. So that was the most scaring moment in the whole path to courtroom. Encourage people to see that Jehovah has no organization, especially not Jehovah's Witnesses, and that they are not protected. And if you attack the shunning rule, then you are not attacking Jehovah. Lots of people understood after some meetings that they were just in a cult and a cultic organization, and were thanking me. And afterwards, the stories of what happened after being disfellowshipped came in, and then we got courage and thought we are not alone, because Watchtower is always saying, "Oh, this is an isolated case. This is just one individual who is not happy with what we do, but this is not some general thing." But if I look back on what happened, then I would say it was not so scary after all.
Well, you certainly bear the demeanour, Patrick, of someone who isn't too frightened. Might I even suggest, to a degree, enjoying this as well? You might, because you have picked a fight with Watchtower and won. So congratulations, my friend. And summary thoughts from Mark.
Well, thank you, Patrick and Kim. It's kind of hard to follow up on those comments. They were excellent and to the point. I did want to say something to Patrick. We've seen similar situations in other countries like Canada, for example. A few years back, we had the Randy Wall versus Watchtower, or the Highwood congregation case. And what happened there was that Randy won in the lower court. Now, he was disfellowshipped, and he argued that the disfellowshipping policy very negatively impacted his work because his clients were almost all witnesses, and the enforcement of shunning devastated not only his personal friendships with friends and family, but it devastated his work and caused him to lose income. So he actually won in the lower courts of Alberta, but then Watchtower appealed it to the Supreme Court, and Watchtower won there. In fact, they even published in the Watchtower website, in the JW.org website, that their policy of disfellowshipping was upheld. And of course, we know they call it a loving provision. So that being said, I know your case is a lot different. It's in Europe, for one. It involves a lot more witnesses to the case. It involves, a financial penalty that has been assessed against the organization. So there are many differences, but there is always the possibility, and I think you are looking forward to them appealing this to a higher court or a European high court, whatever the case. So, I guess my question to you is, in lieu of a comment, but my question to you is, it seems like what happened in Canada, even though that was a loss for Randy Wall and Jehovah's Witnesses all over Canada because of that, we saw that there were some great positives that came out of that. For example, we have Watchtower's own lawyer lying to the Canadian Supreme Court, where he said that normal family relations continue after a person is disfellowshipped. We know that to be an outright lie. Anyone who's a Jehovah's Witness will tell you that normal family relations do not continue at all. So the good part about that was that there was a great deal of publicity. We have them lying to the court. Eventually, that's going to catch up. So I guess my sort of final comment to you is, if the worst should happen and you were to lose this in the higher court of appeal, wherever that may be, what is your takeaway to this in terms of the positives that have come from all of this?
Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Right.
He's always profound, Patrick.
Well, I think Patrick makes a very good point that we do learn from these things. And, ultimately, if we can't win in the court, in a literal court, whether it's in Belgium or the Netherlands or Canada or the United States, we have the court of public opinion. Ultimately, as Lloyd has said for many years, people have a right to vote with their feet. And that is probably the strongest position any human being can take, is when they gain the power to walk away from this organization and say, I want my freedom. I was baptized as a child. I was influenced. I don't want any parts of that anymore. And I don't want my family relationships taken away because I no longer believe this Jehovah's Witness faith or any faith. So, court of public opinion. And, you know, for everybody watching, that is why the JW Watch is here and all the other YouTubers out there and channels. We're trying to report on the news accurately. And look, you know, I think we had up to 1,100 people watching. That's a significantly high number than we'd have a couple of years ago. It shows how many people are interested in this work, in these stories. So final comments, Patrick, thank you. And all of your colleagues. I know you've worked with, I think, our friend Pascal and many others for years on this. And you've had a lot of personal time and expense. It is not overlooked, Patrick. Thank you for doing this and raising the awareness. And look how many media outlets covered it. I just got a report from Norway. Is it Vartland News? Sorry, I had the link up here.
I think considering how many media outlets are covering it already, Patrick's been incredibly generous making time for us here at JW Watch.
Indeed.
So thank you, Patrick. It's very, very kind of you to do that.
You're welcome.
And we've been filming, haven't we, Patrick? I had an opportunity to interview you in Croatia for a forthcoming mini documentary. So viewers should look out for that, hopefully before the end of this month, because Tibor's working on it now. But that's, I think, all we have time for. Again, congratulations, Patrick. Wonderful work. And we will continue to follow developments with interest, and Kim will be looking to get her teeth into that whole taking pictures malarkey that they were up to.
Indeed.
But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much to my panel for a fantastic show. Viewers, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.
Say to the world that